everyone. Thank you for having me today. My name is Kristen Cleven, and as Lisa-Ann mentioned, I manage international market development for Bloom Energy right here in Sunnyvale. I've spent the most part of my career in clean tech, either in automotive or energy, and year after year goes by, and I think it just gets more and more exciting to be a part of this industry. It's fantastic. Let's see, I am your afternoon token, very pregnant lady. So to answer a couple of your questions, I'm 38 weeks pregnant, starting to feel pretty rough, and it's a girl. But I'm here to talk to you today about the road to 100% clean energy. And I want us to think about how we prioritize things when we think about clean, right? So climate change, the effects of climate change are upon us, and the solutions are there, but they're multifaceted. So I want to consider that today when we have our talk. Now, first I want to talk a little bit about Bloom. So Bloom Energy is a solid oxide fuel cell company. What does that mean? That means we make highly efficient and reliable power plants that run on biogas or natural gas. We actually generate our power electrochemically. That means that for our customers, they actually get power that's cleaner than the alternative, the grid alternative. We were founded in 2001. We were commercialized then in 2009, and we went public in July of this year. We power retailers, we power manufacturers, data centers, telecom operations, and much, much more. I'm going to talk for a minute about our impact on the environment, right? To date, our operations have avoided 3.5 billion pounds of CO2. We've saved over 126 billion gallons of water. We don't emit NOx, SOx, or particulates in operation. And when we're compared to the U.S. Natural gas fleet, we're actually 26% more efficient. So when I talk to a lot of people all over the world, and I get asked the question all the time, how do fuel cells compare to solar? So I have an example for you. Let's take two sites that are the exact same load profile, right? So one of the sites says, I'm going to buy a megawatt of fuel cells. One site says, I'm going to get a megawatt of solar. Now, because fuel cells have a high capacity factor, we're going to cover the majority of this customer's load, whereas the solar energy can't cover as much. So they're going to rely on grid power more. Now, when you look at the end of the year, fuel cells had a lower carbon footprint than the solar project. Now, this I recognize is going to vary depending upon your region and your load profile, but food for thought here. Okay, enough about fuel cells. Back to the idea. So when I think about 100% clean energy and the race to get there, I think about one thing. It's a mad, 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 mad world. This is an obscure 1963 movie, which I love. And the premise is that a group of people in Southern California find out that there's a stash of riches buried somewhere, and they all scatter to try and find the loot. Now, there are mistakes, there are consequences, pratfalls, and I think we all understand that they never actually recover the money, right? So what am I saying here? Well, if we just focus on the goal, then we're going to struggle to get there. We have to identify the how. So let's level set for a second. What do we want? We're all pretty much in agreement, I imagine. We all want clean energy. We want to conserve our resources. We want to see strong economies and have healthy air, right? All in agreement there. What don't we want? We don't want rising emissions. We don't want instability of our supply. We don't want grid outages. And we definitely don't want our network to be subject to cyber attacks or physical attacks. So I'm reminded of the case in Germany. Take Germany, a place I've lived and worked in clean tech. They set out a long time ago to reduce their emissions and will have spent upwards of $600 billion by 2025 incentivizing renewables. Where are they today? Well, their emissions have plateaued, and they still rely mostly on coal for their energy economy. They've already said they are not going to meet their target. We as the world, we kind of understand our target, right? It's been laid out for us. This chart is pretty clear. We understand there are consequences to not meeting it, and it seems pretty simple, right? We now know that 1.5 degrees is kind of an okay target for us. So I like to think about it in two eras. First era is what we're in now. I call it the decarbonization era. So what's it characterized by? We have an increase in renewable penetration. We're decommissioning coal plants. We're swapping out high carbon tech with low carbon tech. We're providing grid services to help balance the grid for inbound renewables. It's great. We've made a lot of progress, but we have more to do. The second era, I call the sustainable planet era. Now, we're still decarbonizing here, but we also have to deal with the consequences of climate change, and that's a big deal. What does it involve? It involves managing the human methane waste that's increasing. More and more extreme weather events that impact our infrastructure. How are we going to deal with those? Surging digital economy and the electricity demand that comes with that in both developed and emerging markets. More people moving to cities, increased demand in urban centers. And then we've decided to electrify our transportation network, transportation system. Okay? So what I want to do now is go back to fuel cells and give you a couple examples of how fuel cells are impacting this sustainable planet era I'm talking about. All right, so we definitely need to prevent the methane from human waste from getting into our atmosphere. It has to be a priority. So if we were to take all the methane available in California, fuel cells could actually power 2 San Franciscos. All right, that's pretty good. Now, what are we doing today? We are powering retail stores in California with biomethane. Now, that's a good start, but it's also a great example of a technology that traditional renewable, a solution to a problem that traditional renewable technologies can't handle. Let's talk about urbanization. So, fuel cells in an urban context can be a boon for economic development and avoid transmission and distribution assets. We currently have a project in Brooklyn for Con Ed where powering community facilities, we're avoiding major infrastructure asset upgrades, and we're enabling the renaissance of a neighborhood in transition. Moving to Korea. Korea, land is very scarce. It's the #1 country in Asia in terms of electricity intensity per capita. So fuel cells provide a simple solution in that we're a very power dense technology, and so we provide a lot of power in a limited amount of space. We enable that through the development of a really cool power tower you can kind of see here. And that's actually going live in a couple weeks, so that's exciting. Now, let's talk about the 100-year storm that we know happens every 2 to 3 years. So it impacts homeowners, it impacts businesses, It impacts municipalities. It is devastating on economies. It's devastating on already vulnerable infrastructure, right? Now, let's talk about the city of Hertford. They endured Hurricanes Irene and Sandy in consecutive years. I got married during one of those storms. Not recommended. But Hartford said, look, I need a solution that is reliable and resilient, and I can power my community during the storm and after the storm and help my people recover. So Bloom serves as the backbone there for a community microgrid that its primary purpose is to provide power 24/7, but it also keeps the lights on at these facilities when the power goes out, which is a critical need and really important when there are these major storms. All right, to wrap up, what do we want? We want clean energy. We know that. No disputing that. But we also want power to be reliable. We want it to be plentiful. We want to be able to afford it, and we want a lot of people to access it. So, in conclusion, I've shared how fuel cells can impact that. So can a lot of other technologies. What I want you to consider today is how your brand of clean tech fits into the sustainable planet paradigm. Or otherwise, just ask yourself, what does clean really mean to me? Thank you.